What's up, Outliers? Welcome to Performance Bites for bite-sized insights into complex subjects in health and performance. Today, we're going to look into sprinting. So, if you've listened to the Huberman Lab Podcast episode with Stuart McMillan, who is a world-renowned sprint coach, this is a little bit of a piggyback on this because I recently listened to the episode myself, and I absolutely loved so many different things that was being said during that podcast and that interview. So, little background, if you're not familiar, I actually have a 10-year sprint career that I don't talk about a lot because obviously like action sports, motocross and stuff like that tends to take up a big portion of what I'm seen as. And in actuality, I actually took a major break from motocross when I was in middle school, high school, and college, where I actually became a track and field sprinter, rather. So my own personal experience with sprinting kind of is like my second love to dirt bikes, but is still kind of my passion, the thing I really enjoy doing. And I've done it for the past 3 years over the summer, just kind of for fun, like working out. And I've just really been getting more and more into it, which is funny because I'm almost 32 now. And I'm like, oh, like, am I out of my sprint prime? Can I still sprint fast? Can I still do this? Can I still do that? And I'm sure a lot of people kind of feel that way when it comes to sprinting, like, I'm too old. Maybe I don't have the ability to do it. I'm going to hurt myself, blah, 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 all this sort of stuff. And so that's kind of what I want to talk about because as someone that has always just kind of been fast, I grew up racing behind the swing set, sprinting, running with my friends and all this stuff, and just always was fast. And when I got in middle school and started doing track and field, I started to win a lot of the sprinting competitions and stuff like that. That went on to high school where I got a lot of state medals. That went on to college where I competed collegiately. So when it comes to sprinting, it is a little bit of something that if you're going to do it at a high level, you kind of are born with, but it doesn't mean that if you're not born with it, you can't still do it effectively for yourself as an individual. Your time just might not be as fast as somebody else's time, which doesn't matter about the time. It's actually about the activity. And that's what the Huberman Lab podcast actually went over, was the benefits of sprinting. And they talked a lot about skipping for individuals to basically regain power. So obviously it's getting nicer out, the sun is shining, it's getting warm, but that also means that I'm going to be sweating more. And that's where Next Hydration is going to come in and help me replenish my electrolytes that I'm losing my sweat. I actually formulated Next Hydration to mimic the electrolytes that we lose in our sweat with 800 milligrams of sodium and 300 milligrams of potassium. It's a nice light flavor of lemon, which was also a huge priority when making it, to make sure that it's not overpowering and make your mouth nappy and stuff like that. So more like a lemon water, which could be super refreshing on a hot training day. If you want to try Next Hydration, head over to nexthydration.com. Use code OutlierAthlete for 10% off. So we've talked a lot about hypertrophy, breaking down muscle tissue. We've talked about strength, which is gaining the ability to activate muscle fibers and actually give them more power output. Meanwhile, we haven't talked about just sheer power a lot. And that's where sprinting kind of comes into this podcast a little bit more. So what I really want to break down in this is, during that episode, they mentioned something about when you get older, you might not have the ability to sprint anymore. Totally true. Power is the first thing that we lose when we aren't training it anymore. It's something that the body just seems to not really want to keep around. And primarily it's because power takes a lot of energy and also a lot of impact. So with that energy and impact, the body's going, I don't think this is the most important thing for me to be doing as far as my survival as I age. So the body is always going to basically look for the path of least resistance, and power is quite the opposite of the path of least resistance. It's going to make you have to move fast, which takes a lot of neuromuscular activity. It takes a lot of overall energy to make us, elevate off the ground, essentially. So when we're looking at power, we kind of got to break down the steps before we get into power. And I think that's where people that maybe feel like, maybe you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, or even in your 20s and you've never really like trained power, the place to start with it, and what I would really kind of take somebody through if I was going to be working with someone on this, is I would start in a training program where we first work on gaining range of motion. Because when we look at power, most of the time it's exhibiting a triple extension, which is going to essentially be extension of the ankle, which is also called plantar flexion, knee extension, and then hip extension. That's our triple extension. So the ankle, knee, and the hip extend, and typically they're extending with the knee behind the hips to project us and propel us forward. So when we look at it that way, if somebody is unable to first reach full ranges of motion, flexion, extension, rotation, internal, external rotation at the hips, abduction, adduction, circumduction at the hips, flexion, extension at the knee, and then all of the different types of mobility that the ankle is capable of. If one person is not capable of first getting those ranges of motion, that triple extension already is going to be basically hindered and not be what it needs to be. So first things first is going to be gaining range of motion in the joints, and that's also going to include some flexibility of the muscles, but training through range of motion rather than training through like heavy weight and stuff like that. Gaining that range of motion is definitely priority number one. Second to that, if somebody is not strong, they're not going to be able to give themselves enough power output to essentially project themselves off the ground quickly, but also you're going to increase your chances of injury if the muscles aren't strong enough, because whenever there's a concentric contraction, which is a contraction of shortening, there's an eccentric contraction that occurs on the opposite side. And so we have agonist-antagonist systems. So like when the quad fires, the hamstring must lengthen. So, and vice versa, of course. And in sprinting, jumping, running, that is going to be a big factor. So if somebody is very, very strong in their quadriceps, but maybe not so strong in their hamstrings, that's definitely opening up the possibility of injury to the hamstring, which when it comes to sprinting, and go back to that triple extension, power, and huge ranges of motion. And if that hamstring is not strong enough and cannot participate in enough lengthening and eccentric control, that's where we see a pulled hamstring come into play, which is probably most likely going to be something that happens if somebody just like, it's like, oh man, I haven't sprinted in 20 years. I'm just going to go outside and sprint on the street as fast as I can. Probably going to pull a hamstring. The groin, which when we talk about the groin, that's an area, but when we talk about the muscles, those are like going to be your adductors, hip flexors, internal rotators, and stuff like that. Those guys are going to also be at risk of injury. And something that does happen, unfortunately, more often than not, is that groin injury. So we also need to gain maximum range of motion, flexibility, and strength in the muscles in the groin. Now, I'm not talking specifics on how to do that because it's really kind of tough per individual what that's going to look like. But when you start to gain your ranges of motion, start to gain your mobility, flexibility, you're going to start to recognize the things that you need more than maybe somebody else needs. Because I might have somebody go into a super deep squat and their hips are just fine, but their hamstrings are tight, or vice versa. So it's really kind of testing yourself, seeing what you personally need. Now, to gain that strength, a good method of going through this is going to be go through phases. So phases of hypertrophy first. So that phase could look anywhere from 4 to 12 weeks of just hypertrophy. And we've talked about hypertrophy. You can go check out the hypertrophy episode for greater details on that. So go through that. We break down muscular tissue. We get more remodeling. And when we remodel it, we create more strength to it. Once you go through that phase, we would break into strength, where strength is going to actually be creating more overall maximal force. So we're creating more force that we can create in the tissue so that we can keep the tissue safe, but also take our body weight and multiply it to be able to propel ourselves off the ground. So strength is going to be the next phase. We also have a strength episode, so go listen to that. So gaining strength, now we're looking at power. Okay, so power has some crossover with strength because strength training, we're looking at sets anywhere from three to 6 sets with repetition schemes of 2 to 6 reps, and a high percentage of our 1 rep max being anywhere from like 80 to 95%, even 100% sometimes. Now, power is a little bit different because power, we want to be able to move quickly, while strength is, I can deadlift a lot of weight, but that weight typically isn't going to be moving very fast. So power is actually how you can displace, say, a bar, a dumbbell, a kettlebell, and make it move quickly. So we're going to have similar rep schemes as we would have for strength, but we're going to change our overall intensity or a percentage of 1 rep max so that we can move bar fast, essentially. And with doing that, we can also step away from the weight room and start working on drills. So this is where they really talked about this a lot in the podcast on Huberman, was skipping. So they're like, oh, well, skipping sounds so childish, all this stuff. We need to rename it. And they're like, oh, it's plyometrics. So it is plyometrics. So plyometrics essentially are the ability to take force, absorb it, and then redistribute it. A lot of that happens throughout our feet and throughout our calf muscles of the gastrocnemius dorsolaris, and then the big old tendon of the Achilles tendon. So it's almost like a spring coil getting loaded and unloading and giving us maximal force potential through those lower extremities. Now, that's a lot of what we're going to get when it comes to our sprinting, and the hip flexors are going to flex and lift after that spring. That's going to drive the knee up. Then the quad fires, which is going to do an extension of the knee, while the hamstring fires to pull it back underneath us. So we have this sequence of glute fire, calf extension, the springboard effect, hip flexors pull into flexion, knee comes up, knee extension because of quad, hamstring fires to pull it back underneath, and then we get this repetition. So everything's kind of working together there. Now, to train plyometrics, we don't have to get that complex. If you are doing pogo hops or bunny hops, technically, plyometric drill. And they don't have to be huge. So you don't need to jump to your maximum capacity every time you do a pogo hop or anything like that. You could simply start low. And honestly, even just the act of doing it could be enough to start for you as an individual. Because like I said, the worst thing you can do is get going too quickly, and that's going to end in injury, essentially, which is why I talked about, a long hypertrophy phase, a long strength phase before even getting into this. And even before that, a long mobility phase before the hypertrophy. So you're kind of putting all these things in place. And then you have to build up basically strength in your tendons and your ligaments, because your muscles are strong and the tendons and ligaments are getting stronger as you're doing that. But when you do plyometrics, the force that is being put on these body parts essentially starts to multiply very quickly. And so there's nothing that you can do in the gym to basically put 5-6 times your body weight into your joints compared to when you sprint. You're easily doing that. Obviously, if you're a freak and you weigh 120 pounds and can back squat 800 pounds, that's unheard of. You should be doing something else than sprinting. But with that being said, when we get into sprinting or plyometrics and the drills that go for sprinting, we don't have to do them perfectly right off the bat. We can essentially reduce the amount of impact that is happening, and that's just a regression. So it's totally cool. Starting with a 2-legged pogo hop, just hopping getting a little bit of that power extension. You might not even leave the ground, but just the act of doing it, getting the arms involved, might be a great place to start. And doing that 2-3 times a week for durational time to just build up the tissue and start to understand. And as you start to get more comfortable and the tissue starts to understand what you're doing, maybe add a little bit more intensity to it. And then once you feel comfortable with that, you start to add single leg pogos, and then you can add lateral work and stuff like that. And you're just building slowly. And that's going to be a process as well, because the worst thing in this instance is getting going too quickly in the tendon of your Achilles or your patella basically will get agitated because it's taking too much force that it's not accustomed to. So you want to build slowly to be able to get yourself in a position where you can withstand those maximal forces that are going to come with sprinting. So after a couple months' time, you start to feel better, starting to come around. You can start to incorporate these skipping drills. So skipping is a powerful plyometric, essentially. A couple different skip types. We got A skip, B skip, C skip, skip for height, skip for distance, or just plain old skipping. So it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be crazy. All these drills are very much available online. It's not hard to find instruction on how to do these things. But these drills might be a great place to start in incorporating them into your warm-ups, into the late warm-ups before doing any sort of activity might be good. But also just like skipping is a really healthy thing to do. It helps you go through ranges of motion and stuff like that. So we're still not quite to sprinting yet, but we're getting there. So you got your skipping in, you do that for a while, you incorporate it into warm-ups, you maybe even do it as a full workout where you're just doing like a skipping workout. Something they recommended on the podcast was incorporating skipping into your jogs. That would be a wonderful way of doing it. You're at the track, say you skip 50 meters and run 200 meters, skip 50 meters, run 200 meters, whatever it might be. You can mix it in wherever you please, honestly. So after a while, you should start to feel more comfortable. Your coordination should start to increase. You should be feeling like, oh, I actually have some like power that I can put out with this. Meanwhile, it is important to make sure that you're maintaining your strength in the gym once a week, twice a week if you feel up for it, so that you're not losing the strength that you just built in that previous phase. So after doing that for a while, we can incorporate things like bounding, striding, which is essentially going to be just a very exaggerated skip kind of mixed with running when it comes to bounding. And then striding is learning how to basically run fast without exerting high amounts of effort. I wish I could say that better, but that's really kind of what it is. And it's something you'll feel when you get there. It's not really like something to describe via words. It's like more of a feeling. So you'll know. After you feel like you get that far, then we start to look into increasing your running speed and starting to feel what a sprint might feel like. Now, all of this is all nuanced because every individual is going to be so different. Also, your background, your muscle fiber type, your age, your training age, your injury reports and stuff like that. Like, there's a lot to take into consideration when it comes to these things. So if you take longer or you feel like you're moving quicker through this progression, no worries. Like, this is a very unique, individualized thing, which is why I want to be able to help sprinters get better, but I also want to help people get back to sprinting. So if you're looking for programs or looking for a coach to work with, obviously I'm right here, happy to do it. Just go to outlierathlete.com, reach out to me, and we'll talk about setting you up with a program. But otherwise, when it comes to getting to where you want to get, you might not have like a North Star. You might not be like, I want to compete in track meets. You're just more so focused on like your longevity and your health and stuff like that. And like I said, power is the first thing to go. So if you can generate power and strength in your tissue, then you're obviously putting yourself in a place that is ahead of others at your age, no matter what your age really is. And that's going to increase longevity for your tissue, longevity for your life. And also, we're talking about a 5-6 month training program I just kind of described. So, it's pretty cool when you kind of break it down that way, because we're looking at things long term. We're not just looking at them short term, essentially, when we look at these things. So yeah, a lot of information around the sprinting. But like I said, my background in sprinting is as big as it is in other sports and action sports, but I really do find it to be something that I'm passionate about and something that I'm going to incorporate more and actually get back to sprinting again because the weather's starting to get better. So, yeah, I really thought this would be a fun topic to talk about. I had a lot of fun. I just literally just went off the cuff here. So I hope you enjoyed listening or watching and took some information. And if you have questions, please either ask below, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to assist. That's why I'm here. So thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one.